I think the biggest skill is just learning how you work. Because when you
Mhm.
freelance, you are on your own. You don't have somebody dictating how you have to work, which is a blessing and a curse.
Hello and welcome to Freelancing 101. This is episode 4. It's focusing on how to sell writing services with Lauren Laws. My name's Connor Welch. I'm a digital ad specialist and I help companies advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, TikTok, and more. With me is Lauren Laws. She's a creative copywriter and brand manager. And on her LinkedIn, it says, whatever written words you need, I'll write them. I can do anything from 5 words to 1.5 hours. What did you mean by that? First of all, thanks. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thanks for having me. So, my background is I went to film school to write screenplays and all that, and so I think I said 1.5 hours because I think films should be closer to 90 minutes. But,
Yes.
that would be my ideal, and so, yeah, that's been a thing I've tried to balance, the fact that I do a lot of marketing, but I still love to do the creative things in film and theater and television, so
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, cool. Before we dive into all the questions I have for you, I'll just explain that Freelancing 101, the overarching objective is just to help aspiring freelancers find side hustle work or go full time. And then this episode, we're going to focus on how or what, why, and how you can freelance specifically with selling your writing services. So you're the absolute perfect guest, but we'll start with the what, and then I'm going to ask you some why. And then I really want to dive into how exactly you got it to work, but maybe even more broadly, how other people could potentially get it to
mhm.
work. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Anything you want to share with us before we dive into just some questions?
No, I think this is a great idea for a podcast. Freelancing is a whole beast to navigate, and everyone does a little bit differently. And so maybe some of the things I say will apply, and maybe they won't, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, what I've already found is it's somewhat therapeutic to just talk with another freelancer.
hmm
The struggles and the roller coaster effect that I've experienced, it seems like others have as well. And so, worst case, it gets absolutely no listens and it's just a therapy session for me and
That's
maybe you.
important too. Yeah.
That's absolutely important. Yeah. Well, cool. I'll just dive in. So, this section is what? So, care to explain like what is freelance copywriting and brand management, but maybe even just freelance writing?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the trickier things about being a freelance writer specifically is right now there's so many different types of writing people are looking for. There's content and SEO driven things like writing blogs, writing ebooks, writing longer form things. Ebooks are used for lead generation, getting people's emails, and are sometimes short, sometimes long, often boring. Just kidding.
Hmm.
Um, and then there is copywriting is more like ads and it can be websites. Um, it's kind of hard to define because it really depends who you're talking to. So for me,
Hmm.
copywriting is shorter, more creative, um, and content writing would be longer form, more researched, more technical. And there's also writing for products like product description, which are more technical, but sometimes more creative depending on what brand you're working for. And that's where, as a copywriter, I kind of naturally also became like the creator of the brand because when I was
Hmm.
working full time, I was the copywriter at a place. And so when you're writing all the copy, you're also creating the brand voice because you're the one writing it. And so that's another side to things that it kind of goes hand in hand. So you're never really sure what people are looking for in a writer. That's so one of my tips would be define what they're looking for. If they're looking for more content, and often they're looking for everything, they're looking to hire you to do all of it.
Hmm.
But I would say it's hard to be good at all of it. And it might be good to decide that you're going to be a content writer. You're going to get good at things like SEO. And again, sometimes people have an SEO person and they will feed you the information you need for SEO, but other times they expect you to do that as well.
Interesting. So it's really rather broad. I could
Mhm.
imagine it's hard to define exactly what you can and can't do sometimes.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
And
I
I think it
experienced that so much as a freelancer. So that's just part of freelancing, I think. But go ahead.
yeah, and it gets really hard because you wanna establish yourself with your own brand when you're getting clients, and that's why I recently have changed my thing to comedic/conversational copywriter because
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of stuff I want to do. So while I will do other things and I write for some tech companies that are a little more serious or technical, I think you want to figure out how to attract the clients you want to attract. And I enjoy more doing like comedic videos and brands with that are like willing to and also excited about having a personality.
Yeah.
But that said, I feel like there is a lot of work in blogs, even with like AI and different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just a lot of space for writers in this freelance space.
Yeah. Ad copy. I mean, I hire contractors to help me with ad copy, and it is such a blessing because I could do all the technical aspects, but I don't know if you care for ad copy, and I'm sure the conversational slash content is probably a little bit more fun. But to see performance when it's like actually written by a dedicated writer, it's incredibly noticeable just through the data. So
Yeah.
huge range of work just from writing.
Ad copy is another one too, where it's like you then need to know social media and you need to know different
Hmm.
things. Even if you're just writing ad copy, those ads run on Facebook, they run on Instagram, they run on
Yep.
TikTok. And so yeah, it's not just the writing. Nothing anymore, right? Everybody expects you to be
Hmm.
able to do 12 different jobs. So,
This actually leads perfectly into my next question. But as you've freelanced, what other skills have you found that you kind of need?
a skill that I don't have that's so important is being organized.
Yep.
You got to invoice and do all those things. A skill that I actually enjoy that I think is really important is networking and
Hmm.
personal brand is kind of annoying when people talk about it like on LinkedIn, like, oh, have your personal brand. But when I talk to people about it, and especially in talking to a lot of women about it, and like just to choose that as an example demographic, it is sometimes going against what everybody else is doing is going to set you apart, but it's also going to exclude you from a lot of things
Totally.
because it's a really hard balance. Being unique sets you apart, and a lot of people are not looking for that. They say they are. They
Hmm.
say they want their brand to be different. They want to stand out. But and I've had a lot of experiences where I get hired because people are like, "We love that you're doing fun things and that you're creative." And then when I write something for them, they're like, "Actually, can it be more like this thing that they've already seen and they already want, that's
Yep.
already established, it's already safe." And it's hard as a contractor because it's like, it's not my business. It's not like my money isn't on the line. But
Hmm.
one of my biggest struggles is pushing people or like gently pushing people to do something more creative. And I think those interpersonal skills too of knowing how to work with clients. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like that part of it. I enjoy working with
Hmm.
clients to um I look at it like a puzzle kind of. There's what they want, there's what is creative, there's what the data shows will work, and combining all of those together. I think that's really important. I see a lot of people fall into the trap of this is creative freelancers just wanting to do something cool,
Hmm.
or on the other side, people that are just want to do what they know has worked. And there's somewhere in the middle where you can say, I think this will work based on past data, things we've
Hmm.
seen that have worked, but also how do we push that one step further?
Absolutely. It's interesting the overlap with just ads in general and just content writing or even just ad copy.
Hmm.
Well, thank you. What training, if any official training or just uh, training that you advise, is needed to start writing as a freelancer?
Um, I mean, you should be good at writing.
Yeah, that's
It's
probably a good
hard to
answer.
it's hard to know if that's training or,
Mhm.
um I
More
mean,
of a skill
yeah,
development. Mhm.
there are a lot of things that are good to learn, and you wanna balance that with, like, trusting your instincts and bringing I think especially as a contractor, bringing your unique voice to the table, that's what you have because everyone at this company has been thinking the same way.
Mhm.
About being creative, I think that is one of the most important skills, and that's been ingrained in me actually since I was in school many years ago. I had this business professor, Shane Clark, and it was this I studied film, but I decided to take this business class and I was like, these people are so different than the film people. Like
Mhm.
everyone was thinking inside the box. Like we each did our resumes and I brought mine and it had my headings were in a color. And people were like, I didn't know you could have color on your resume. Like we're talking that kind of
Mhm.
people. And
Mhm.
he said and this was again many years ago, but he said that he felt that an MFA would be the new MBA and not necessarily you have to go get a degree, but that creativity was what was going to help people in business.
Mm.
And I have, first of all, I clung to that because that was my strength versus everyone else. I was not businessy minded. And so I was like, yes, this validates me. But I really do think it's true, despite my bias towards creativity. I think learning how to be creative and learning how that means adjusting your schedule to when you're most creative or
Mm.
finding just the right amount of distractions. It's really comes down to how your brain works. Like, I have ADHD and other things, but I have a great therapist that was like, you just need to figure out how your brain works. So if some of the ADHD
Mhm.
things resonate with you, great. If some don't. And so I think
Totally.
I think the biggest skill is just learning how you work. Cause when you
Mhm.
freelance, you are on your own. You don't have somebody dictating how you have to work, which is a blessing and a curse.
Totally. And that's so good with the training aspect in mind. It goes back to like it reminds me of just even working out or just being physically healthy
hmm
to like learn how you can perform and show up at the gym and kind of keep going. The exact same, you almost need to train yourself on how to freelance and be independent and for you be incredibly creative and know when the creativity glass is full and when it's empty and how to like refill that. So that's
hmm
fantastic. So that's kind of the what advice, I guess. So tell me why you chose to go the freelance route with writing.
Um, that is a I guess it goes back to kind of what I was just saying, which is it is hard to be a writer when they want you to sit in front of a computer 8 hours a day, a specific 8
Hmm.
hours a day.
Yep.
And I am it's tough because I have friends who've only done freelance, and I'm actually really glad that I did work full time
Mm.
for a little bit I worked for a product, like a health food product-based company and for a tech company. And what was helpful about that was that I know how a company looks on the inside. And so as a
Mhm.
freelancer, you're so often on the outside and you're like, why isn't this person getting back to me? And now I know it's because they had to give it to somebody who had to give it to somebody who had to give it to somebody. And I've
Yep.
seen the inner workings and how inefficient they can be. And so instead of taking that so personally as a freelancer, I could be like, oh no, they're probably dealing with their own things. Or
Totally.
like an extreme example, like if somebody isn't getting back to me or paying me, I'm like, every company has an accounts payable, right? And so some of that insider knowledge where you can be like, I can guess who, or sometimes you get on a meeting and there's all these different titles, and it can be helpful to know that as well, have some context for that as well. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's the opposite. But when I was working full time, I would go to work for 8 hours and just feel burnt out. And then I would, at midnight or 1 a.m., I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have all these ideas for that ad
Mm.
or for that email. And I was working so many hours and it didn't feel efficient. And for a while, I was juggling freelance and full time. Um, I was doing a lot of that in like early 2020 when there was nothing to do anyway. So
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I can't do much and there's not a lot going on, so I'm going to do both. And if you are doing that, which some people might be in that transition phase, try not to do that for very long because you will burn out so fast.
Yes.
And it is scary to take the leap
Yes.
when you're
Hmm.
not sure about income, but juggling both is so much. And so I was in a position where I was like, I have a consistent client that if I had to, I could live off this, and so I just it the short of it is it just works better with my creativity, and I really like I think it's really helped me to work for so many different companies because I bring a perspective of like, okay, I saw this company did it this way, this company did it this way. And so in a way I feel like I'm more valuable having worked for more different kinds of companies.
Hmm.
And also I can write whenever I want. And now that means I can go different places and travel and visit family. And I have a friend who just had a baby and I can just go and help her with her baby.
Hmm.
And the baby's up at 3 a.m. So it's like having that flexibility is invaluable. And there's a lot of workplaces that say they're flexible in different things, but they're really hard to find. And then a lot of
Yep.
them like change their mind. So,
Totally. So many pros for freelancing. I think absolutely, and you nailed this, is the flexibility for both just your time, but also to then cater with your performance. For me,
mhm,
I also have ADHD, and so I found that clocking in at 9 and then clocking out at 5 in an office, usually was an open office space with other
mhm,
people, just did not work for me. And I get so frustrated. And now, I can work uh, anytime, pretty much anywhere, though I always work in my office because I can cater it exactly to how I can perform or how my brain works. So
mhm,
many pros. I've also, there's a lot of individuals now that I've been connecting more with freelancers that uh, that's the necessity. They cannot
mhm,
find remote work and they're a full-time parent or just have some barrier that shouldn't really be a barrier but is a barrier for what I'll just say is like corporate or full-time work, right? So what about cons? Have you experienced any cons with the freelance style work?
yes.
Yeah.
There are, a lot of people are worried about layoffs and different things right now. And often when I talk to people about freelancing, they are like, well, it's not the stability of a full-time job. And it's like, hate to
Hmm.
say it, but there's no stability anywhere anymore. So yes, that is a con to freelance is there is no stability. And I actually like navigating the layoff season, I don't know, all the layoffs as a freelancer has been interesting because when a company has a bunch of layoffs, they either use you more as a freelancer because they got rid of all their
Hmm.
people, or they just forget about you because I've had this happen multiple times recently. Actually, the person I was working with got laid off, and
Oh, so the
um,
communication connection was
yeah.
severed in a
So
way.
I had, and often with
Interesting.
these layoffs, they just they don't have my email anywhere else or no. So I just had an experience where nobody told me,
Hmm.
and I was like, it was weird timing because the person said they were going on vacation for 2 weeks. So I was just like, well, follow up with them later. They were supposed to respond to something before, but I was like, maybe they were in vacation mode and just didn't respond. And then I get a like email from somebody being like, I'm the new VP. And I was like, oh, they hired a new VP. It took me like so long to realize they had like laid off the entire marketing team and anyone I'd ever worked with was gone. And you just don't know. And that can be scary. But
Hmm.
if you have a lot of different clients, um, then you always know you'll have somebody in theory, and
Yep.
you should always be looking for new clients. So that's a con is that you always should be looking for new clients, even if you feel secure.
It is hard because you'll be, at least in my experience, you'll have plenty of work, but in the back of your mind, it's like, well, there are some potentially red flags with some of these clients that it feels more temporary, or I could see it cutting off. So you always have to be marketing slash prospecting yourself. I also think another con is it's so flexible and it works well with time and like how you can perform, but you have to be in charge of everything. Like
Mhm.
that's the con that I'm experiencing with where I don't know how it is for you, but like handling my payroll and getting
Mhm.
paid and invoicing and writing out all the taxes and things like that. It's there's so much that a corporation used to provide, but all these cons that we've talked about, for me, the pros so outweigh the cons. So
Mhm. Yeah,
just a thought.
invoicing is one thing, and then you have to go back and check that they actually paid you,
Yes. And
which
then
I have
waiting and then yes, yes.
because like, some people, it's 30 and that's the other thing, some people will not pay you for 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
and you're waiting on that, and then if you forget and then you don't realize it until you're like, "I need money again. Where's that money I'm supposed to have?" Then
Yes.
you have to chase them down, and that is rough. And yeah, I mean, with taxes, I'm sure that will come up a lot with
Mm-hmm.
freelancers. But there are some apps and different things that you can use to track all that, but definitely write off everything you can
Yep. Yep.
and use that to your benefit. Also, with like personal growth things, like you can write off some of that
Mm-hmm.
too if you want to read books or get apps. And so,
Totally. And I think as a freelancer, you need to do that because there's a lot of benefits that corporations offer that aren't as good as as when you're freelancing. Some some people experience like lower quality insurance plans or more expensive
mhm,
insurance plans. So yeah, absolutely. Take advantage of all the pros when you're freelancing. So I want to dive into the how, especially
mhm,
like how somebody, if they were aspiring to do something similar to you, Lauren, like what would they need to do or how could they do it? The first question I have with how is really broad, but how do you make income? Like, how do you make
mhm.
money? So broad. I know. I'm sorry.
No, that's, I'll start this is like my spiel I give to everybody.
Okay.
But you need to so for me, I need to tell people that I'm a writer, and I had a very specific experience with this where I was kinda going back and forth, like, I do video, I do this, I do that, and then I was like, I need to just start saying that I'm a writer when I go to networking things, when I talk to people I know. Instead of being like, oh, I do a lot of things, I say I'm a writer and here are some
Mhm.
things that I do because I have gotten clients from like a friend in high school, multiple like friends from high school that I haven't talked to, connected on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, and they were like, "Wait, my company's looking for a writer." I've had people who I'm working with them at one company and then they get laid off, and then they go to another company and they're like, "Wait, I know a writer." Basically, you
Mhm.
need to be in people's minds when they say, "I'm looking for a writer." And then they're like, "Oh, wait, I know somebody," because people want to hire someone they know. And so often it's just like, we need someone to do this really fast. Does anybody know somebody? Or like with freelance, it's not like you go through you apply and you go through a hiring process. I mean, there are some jobs like that, but more often for me, it's been like, does somebody know somebody who can do this? Because that's like the nature of freelance is often it's just for a project. And so that I'm like, tell everybody what you do. You know, there's kind of like a joke that like adults don't know what their friends do for work, right? We all just,
Totally.
you can be super good friends and still not know. Getting into specifics too, because yeah, not everyone knows what a copywriter is. They're always like, is that like copyright law? And it's like, no, I don't know why it's called copywriting, but we write the copy,
Mhm.
explaining that. And that means sharing your work on social, if you do something that you like, sharing
Mhm.
it and being like, "Hey, I did this thing." It doesn't have to be salesy. It's just the biggest thing is just you'd be surprised how many people don't know what you do, and they could be looking for a writer, and they just haven't connected the dots. So I think that's like base level, and it's not like bug all your friends. You don't have to message all your friends and tell them. It's just putting it out there that that's what you do. It comes up a lot in conversation and not
Mhm.
shying away from the fact that uh, it's what you do. And yeah, I was just talking to somebody I never talked to before, and he's like, "So what do you do?" And he's like, "Are you looking for more work?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, I'll let you know if I hear it." He was like in a sort of adjacent industry, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll let you know." And a million of those things will happen, and then, like, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, somebody will remember you again when that question comes up, like, "Do we know anyone who can do this?" Posting on LinkedIn, I mean, that's why I'm here on this podcast because I post on
Yeah.
LinkedIn and we connected,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, Again, a lot of times I talk to people who are outside of, like, the business bro demographic, and they don't wanna post on LinkedIn. And I
Yep.
get it. It's a cesspool out there
For
sometimes,
sure.
but that's another great opportunity to stand out because if you post on LinkedIn and you're not posting the usual stuff, um, it will stand out. And if nobody's, you know, if nobody's liking or commenting, a lot of people message me, like, I just barely had somebody message me that they loved my post, and I was like, "I'm not sure what post you're talking about," because he hadn't liked any post or commented, and he had just messaged me, so I feel like I'm, like, writing a message in a bottle and throwing it into the ocean for, like, no one to ever see, but it will pay off, in a lot of ways, and so I just say networking, networking, networking. I know there are job boards and there are different
Mhm.
things, also, when you are like, I would work on film sets, just talk to everybody. Like, you don't know
Mhm.
who's starting a business, who has a business, commenting on something they're doing, and uh, like also making it about them and not just a sales pitch. There's a lot of bad ways to do sales pitches.
For sure. There's a
Like,
lot of things you shouldn't do, but
yeah, and I've cold messaged people, but I've been like, "Hey, I love this about your brand."
Mhm.
And also don't be afraid to talk to CEOs. Because sometimes they're more reasonable than, like, a marketing manager or whatever. Like, you think that you have to, like, "Oh, I should talk to, like, the creative director or whatever," but sometimes you can just go straight as these small companies, and again, the smaller companies, these CEOs have, like, such passion for their project, and I think if you match that,
Mhm.
they're like, "Yes, that's what I'm looking for."
Absolutely. So to summarize how you make income, you just need to market yourself and be like present in that space as much as
Mhm.
possible, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. So that actually was the next question, but I think you answered that so well. I wanted to dive into marketing yourself online, and you said offline, but I would just say in person typically,
Mhm.
or even, can you tell me, so you kind of hit on online. I think messaging, posting, LinkedIn has been a powerhouse for me, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Real quick, are there any other platforms you do recommend for writers to be
Uh
present?
Well, for sure, if you're writing fiction, get on TikTok. There's a whole book
Mm,
talk. And I think with marketing too, I'm a big TikTok fan since 2019. I know it has some controversy tied to it, but
yeah.
the way TikTok's algorithm helps you find like-minded people,
Mm,
um, is so great. And I don't know that, um, I don't know that's gonna connect you to, like, giant brands or anything, but there are, like, you will find, like, like-minded people who, like, wanna do cool things or who are doing more, like, artistic things, and I've been meaning to make a TikTok that's just, like spec ads,
hmm Kind of like a portfolio in a way.
yeah, that's like,
Yeah.
"Here's how I would advertise this," and, like, make a TikTok of it and just even to yeah, just use it as a portfolio that I could send people.
Currently,
Um
are you posting on TikTok or more commenting on the back end or the
I do post on TikTok, but not professionally. So
oh, not
I j I
okay,
use
I
it
get
as
it.
like, just here's this random thought I had.
How about in-person marketing events? Have you found success there?
Um, yes, and also it's hard, I think. Like,
Hmm.
sometimes you go to these events and it's like everybody is the same. Like, I was talking to somebody who's married to an eye doctor, and she's like, he goes to these conferences, and it's like we were saying that there should be like a marketing. booth at this eye doctor conference, right? Like, you should go to
Mm,
places where it's not just a bunch of marketers talking to other marketers. Like,
interesting.
connecting with people you know is great, but I do think there's something like, yeah, I think that's a given. You should go to networking events that are related to what you do, and you should connect with people. And I mean, marketing is such a big spectrum. You need a whole team to do it. So that is a good way to connect. But I think there is something too to like, connecting outside of that with people who need marketers. And
Mhm.
more lately, I feel like my ideal client is somebody who has no idea about marketing and will just trust me. So, I used to be like, "Oh, I wanna work for these, like, cool marketing agencies," or, "I wanna, like, work with somebody who gets it," but more and more I've been like, "I just wanna work with somebody who's like, yeah, whatever you do is great," because
Mhm.
sometimes the cool brands and the cool CEOs, they, like, want, eh, to they want you to execute their idea, which is can be fine, right? It's a job. But I've found rarely, but there is the rare client that's just like, "I know I need to do something creative." They're like, "I know everyone's doing video, so can you just, like, make me a video?" And they're like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, that's awesome." So, I think in networking, it kind of figure out who you want to attract
Mm.
and then go to where they are or where you think they are.
Going back to that, liking to work with somebody that's just new to marketing, I totally feel the same way. Sometimes when you work with a quote unquote expert marketer and you're just really like for me, I'm just really good with digital advertising, like Meta, Google. And so then to work with a marketer that used to do what I do 10 years ago and then try and butt heads with that individual because I'm like, no, that doesn't apply anymore. I can totally resonate with that. I'll just say like that golden client that's like, hey, we have a really cool brand or service or product, and I'm super passionate about this. How do I market this? Like, what should
Mhm.
I do? It's such a golden find.
Yeah, I think often those are, like, dentists, doctors, like those people
Mhm.
that you're like, "Oh, they're boring," but every once in a while, you, like, find one that's like, "I know I'm boring and I don't wanna be."
Yeah, help me. I love
Yeah.
it. So we've talked about how you make income, and that's really from marketing yourself. Let's say you found a potential client or prospect. How have you discovered whether that client's a good fit for you?
Um, that is a good question. I think you encounter 2 types of clients, and one, it's like they know what they want, they know what their budget is,
Hmm.
and they're like, "I need to accomplish this with this budget." But a lot of times you get clients who are like, "I don't know," and they want you to tell them. And I'm not sure which is better, but you kind of need to know which one you're dealing with to know how to, like, approach it
Hmm.
because especially I don't know, it's kinda hard because it's like, yeah, I could do so many different things for somebody, and I could do a range of quality of things depending on their budget. So I think kind of figuring out what you like to do the most, and I'm not sure I totally know yet. So as far as, like, the work part of it, that's kind of I'm not sure, but as far as, like, other things, like, they need to be a good communicator, they need to communicate,
Hmm.
they need to pay you. I have I don't know, I had one like, I'm pretty chill, but I have definitely, sort of bought into this idea that if you are holding on to clients that don't treat you very well, you're, like, not opening up space for people who are better fits, and I think that's gonna be a big thing for a lot of people. Sometimes I feel like you should let go of some clients even before you have, like, a backup because it's, like, dragging you down in some way, and I think
Hmm.
as a human, but as a freelancer, it's like you have to, like, keep up your energy, like, because you are driving everything, and
Hmm.
if you're, like, beating yourself up because you feel like I don't like, something's, like, nagging you and it, like, eats away at you,
Hmm.
regardless of what it is, like, that's what it was for me, but, um it could be something else for you. So if like something's nagging you where you're like, I don't know why, like
Mm,
I don't have a lot of justification for like dropping this client, but I just feel like I should,
mhm.
then I think you should trust yourself and do that.
See, this is exactly what I was talking about when this podcast being a therapy for me.
Yeah.
Like, I can resonate exactly with what you're talking about. Going with your gut feeling and learning what standard you need to always meet. Unfortunately, when you work with so many different clients that um, can kind of, I don't know, I guess there's a higher possibility of just interacting with some of those negative clients more
Mhm.
often than just jumping from full time to full time job. And setting up your standards and keeping to them, even I think this is especially hard when you are initially starting out where your income is less stable or you need it more. That can be really hard, but I think you and I can both agree that it's so important to just listen to your gut and free up that space. Even if it's not a bunch of time, that nagging sensation that you brought up is such a real thing where it's like, for me, it's like, why are they pushing back so hard on paying me? Like, are they not going to pay me? Or are they like, do they not feel like the quality of work is there to a point where like it just nags away and it takes my energy? And it's like almost not even worth that
Mhm.
income at that point. So,
Doesn't really matter if it's perceived or not, is the energy that you bring. So it's like if you perceive that somebody doesn't respect you, then I was like mad, I was and I
mhm,
wasn't bringing like my best self and I was like and now that's going to reflect to like all these people in the room. If I'm like annoyed with like one person's statement, but like I and now I'm like people are getting this different image of me where I want to always be portraying like I need to remove myself from those situations where I'm not my best self. And yeah, other people should be kinder and whatever, but ultimately it's about you. And there may be situations where you're like, this is terrible and toxic, but I'm still showing up and I
mhm,
can do this for like another month and just always, like you said, checking in with your gut because a lot honestly, if you just spend your whole time looking for a not toxic situation, you're not gonna find that. So
right,
I mean, you're not gonna find very many of those.
mhm,
So just knowing when you've reached that point. And also, like, this just reminded me of a quick anecdote. I just was pitching to this client. I was supposed to pitch 3 ideas, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do I'd always, like, put my own spin on them, but I was, like, always like, "Yeah, and the visuals will be really cool, and there'll be a voiceover." But I pitched 2 ideas kinda like that, and then 1 that was comedic, and that's more like what I like to do, right? And they
mhm,
were like, "We really like the comedic one." And a few people had changed, but I think it was, like, a good reminder to me to show up as me
mhm,
and like you want to know the I mean, I'm big into brand voice, so it's like you want to know the brand voice, you want to know the client and their needs, but like merge that with you. Like you're going to stand out if you seem passionate about something and if you are unique inherently by being yourself because we're all
mm.
different. And so that's just another little reminder that I have to remember. I have to be reminded of that like a few times a year that you should just be
Totally.
yourself.
Yeah, which can be difficult for sure. So, how do you know how much to charge for your services?
Ugh, man, this is
That's
it's
a hard
like
one, huh?
this is the major con of freelance.
Yes.
Because again, it's like every time I think I have a rate for something, I'm like, "Oh, this is a totally different project."
Mhm,
I like to do by project because I write really fast and it's there's like a weird balance when you do hourly, you're like, "I don't wanna charge too much, but I also don't wanna look like I didn't try, like I
mhm,
did this super
mhm,
fast," and so I get hung up in the mind games of charging hourly, but then if you have somebody who asks for lots of revisions, then that can be hard. So I think always include how many if you're doing it by project, say like up to this many revisions or
mhm,
one thing that's worked for me a couple times is if it's a bigger company and you know they have lots of freelancers, and if you have like a decent relationship, I've asked, "What are you paying other freelancers that are doing similar work?" And
Mm.
I actually had somebody be like, "Oh, let me check." And then she got back to me and she was like 90 an hour. And I was like, "Great." Cause I've like at times in my life, like that's how I've been like, "Oh, I probably wouldn't have said that," you know? So there
Mhm.
have been times where letting them say the number has really helped, but a lot of times when you ask people their budget, they're like, it's this like, "No, you go first. No, you go first."
Yeah.
And I will vary it too by, like, how much I wanna do the project, right?
Yep.
And people joke about this, they, like, give a ridiculous amount because they don't wanna do a project, and then people are like, "Sure, yeah, that sounds great." Um, so it's really hard because budgets vary greatly. I've noticed this a lot with video projects when I'm working on video projects. Some people get that, like, commercials cost, like, $1,000,000 to make, and then other people are like, "Well, can't, like, one person in their phone do this?" And it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
like, you can get a 30-second video from one person, and you can get a 30-second video from a crew of 45 and, a bunch of expensive equipment, and it's really hard to know what people are looking for. So, if you can get them to give you their budget, that's great, but
Mhm.
they don't always do that.
I think going back a little bit when you said a range, and one of those ranges uh data point was $90 per hour. I'm sure a lot of potential listeners are shocked by that, but I
Mhm,
just wanted to add in that when you're freelancing, there's two things you need to account for: the extreme value you're bringing to that company by being flexible, by being very little overhead on their end. And then the other thing you need to account for is the actual hours you're putting in are going to have to be more expensive because you're going to be spending a lot of time and energy just to prospect yourself, to interview at different
mhm.
companies, to to market yourself. And so if any listener was just like 90 $100 per hour, that's actually pretty reasonable for a really good freelancer because of these two things that you need to account for: extreme value from that company, and the you got to get away from that 9 to 5 mindset where it's like, oh yeah, like I used to get paid $35 per hour, how could I charge
Yeah,
almost triple that? Well, that's because you're going to be doing a lot of work outside of just that hour. Would you
yeah.
kind of agree with that?
Yeah, and you'll be covering, yeah, it's like you're covering your own insurance, and
Mhm.
it is hard, and I think, like I said, like, some people do just want one person and a phone creating all their content, and other people will invest in content,
Mhm.
and it's I don't know, and some people will say, "Well, I can get the AI robot to write my blogs," and it's like, "Okay."
Mhm.
Um, and or they can go you can go on Fiverr and people do charge like 20 like, I don't know, you can get stuff for like $5 on Fiverr, right? That's the point of
Yep,
it. But
yep.
and it's still that low. And so that's why I think it does come back to like relationships. It's like, do you want me? Like, do you want my expertise? Do you want this? Because I'm not going to say you can't have someone write something for you for cheaper. You can, but what are they actually looking for? And that's where I think it can be good too if you're like, well, actually, like, I also like to be involved in the strategy, or I have this background that's like we were saying before, you can't like just be a writer if you are going to convince people to pay you that much. I feel like it's like you're a writer slash consultant, which I think any freelancer is because it's like you are bringing in an outside perspective. So it's like you do often end up consulting in a way. One of the biggest things, again, another skill to have is be able to explain your value.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's easy with ads because you can be like, I will get this return
Yep.
on an ad. It's harder when you're doing the creative because you're like, well,
Mhm.
I don't, once we hand it off to the ad spend guys, I don't know
Us ad
that.
guys, yep.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard too because it's like, you know what? Honestly, like sometimes the creative ads, I hate to say this and I hate to say this on the record, but sometimes the creative ads do not get the ROI that the hey, click here and buy this do.
Mhm. The template type style.
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah.
where I'm like, I have to find people who want to build a brand and they want
Mhm.
like brand recognition because I'm like, yes, I'm not going to say you can't run an ad that is just an image of your product and three selling points and click on this and people will buy it, right? We all get those terrible ads that are like, just like, what is happening? But obviously they work because you see them all the time. And then they send you some like store that's like half in another language and people get scammed. But they still work, right? Because people are still getting scammed off those. And
Mhm.
so maybe this sums up a lot of the questions you asked, but finding the people that value what you're bringing and who, like I said, I hate to say that, but it's like sometimes you have to be, I mean, you probably shouldn't say this to a client, but sometimes it's like, yeah, actually, this is not going to get you the direct sales. But remember back in the day when we ran ads on TV and nobody knew, like
Mhm.
nobody knew the
The
direct clicks.
attribution.
And
Uh-huh.
we still don't know because I don't always, maybe that's because I'm a millennial, but I like to do my shopping on my computer and not on my phone. So I'm like, I might have seen an
Mm.
ad and I go search it later or any number of things. But man, if people don't see that ROI, they'll just be like, well, your ad clearly sucked. And I'm like, but
Mhm.
maybe it made people like care about your brand or see what you're doing or build up this big picture. And so it's the same with budgets, it's the same with everything. Everyone's just like, how can like hiring you for an hour equal three times that in our revenue? And
Mm.
as a creative, sometimes you have to be like, just trust me.
Just trust me. Well, fantastic. I have one more how to question, and then I try to ask this final question to all my guests. So
Okay.
the last one is um, how do you mitigate risks of freelancing? Because I think, and you've touched on this, where we see it as inherently risky stepping away from a corporate job, though I think that is uh, a fake sense of security. And I think a lot of people
Mhm.
are realizing that now. But that being said, freelancing is like a little risky because you've got to do a lot more. You got to go find your clients, you got to do things on the side or develop skills that you never thought you had to. How have you mitigated the risks, maybe even just initially, of freelancing?
Yeah, I think my advice to somebody who is working full time thinking about going freelance,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm all for like quit your job if it's bad. But I do think before that, you should make sure you have a solid portfolio. Again, this I'm talking to writers, creatives, but probably anyway, solid portfolio that clearly illustrates what you can do and
Mm-hmm.
whether you need to create your own stuff, um spec work as it's called, where you're like, I nobody hired me to do this, but I'm going to make an ad for
Hmm.
whatever, so people have something. As a writer, it can be really hard to have a portfolio because people don't necessarily like to read a lot. And I've written
Mm-hmm.
a lot of good scripts that haven't gotten made into videos because they were just like a part of the process, or
Mm-hmm.
some of my favorite stuff that I feel like shows me the best. And so I am experimenting with this right now, but coming up with different ways, whether it's like you jump on Canva real quick and turn it into a social media post. Because even though you're a writer, not a designer, it's really hard to get people to read a bunch of stuff and be like,
Mm.
oh, yeah, that's good writing. Um, so that's one thing. Have a portfolio. Again, start telling people what you do. But really, that like portfolio, everybody is gonna want to. Actually, a few people have hired me without looking at my portfolio, but
Same.
um,
Same.
but like people are oftentimes, even if someone knows you, they have to prove to somebody else that they should hire you. So having that is a good way to like prepare yourself. Obviously, like having savings and being able
Mm-hmm.
to know that, like I said, when I quit, I was like, I have this one client that, like, if I had to live on $2,000 a month, I could. And
Yep.
more or less, they usually pay that.
Yes.
And it's easy for I don't have a family to support in some of those things. I have a dog, and she's a little bit high maintenance, but
I got two
um,
dogs, so I can relate for sure.
yeah. Or
Mhm.
I don't know. I've talked to people though who are married and, um, like, the other spouse has a job, and I totally get it, and relationships are different, but I'm like, "Go for it now, like, go for it now," because
Mhm.
you have or they're like, "But we wouldn't have, like, the same, we're used to a certain lifestyle, right?" And if you start freelancing though, you can build something even bigger and not dependent on somebody. And so I had this conversation with somebody who was like, "Well, but like my job has better insurance or this or that, and those are all valid things." But I knew she wanted to be a mom, and I was like, "So
Mhm.
you does your job have good maternity leave? Do you are you maybe gonna wanna take a year off?" Like, think about all the other things that freelance is gonna be able to afford you long term, even though you love the stability now and you're gonna struggle for a little bit. You gotta think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, are you gonna be glad that you work for yourself in a way that aligns with your life goals and your life values and priorities. But security, I mean, security and stability, it is very tempting and comforting, and not everybody has
Mhm.
safety nets. But again, you just have to assess your priorities and your life goals. And some people thrive. I'm not saying everybody should freelance because some people thrive on the 9 to 5. They like to go, clock in, clock
Mhm.
out. Um, and take their PTO and do all that. But if you think the, like, itch to go freelance is gonna go away, it's not. Because I have these
Mhm.
conversations with people over and over, and it comes up, like, if it's every year or every few months, it will keep coming up, and you're gonna wish you had started 3 years ago, and
Absolutely.
a year from now, you're gonna wish you had started a year ago,
Yep.
and
It's like
so
investing in the stock market. You know, you can
mhm.
it's you always wish you would have started earlier, especially when things go well. But
Yeah, exactly.
well, thank you so much, Lauren. What's the most valuable way for somebody to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Lauren
Okay.
Laws, Laws. Don't find me on TikTok.
Okay. I'll link your LinkedIn profile in all the comments and such.
Yeah, I'm on
So
other things, but if you want more like lifestyle-y things, I'm like on Instagram too. But business, I am like have a different personality on each social media, which I think is
I
good.
love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I seriously appreciate all this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren.